Hi everybody, welcome back to Indycar on Friday. My name's Gordon Ross. Today's subject, well, two things really. One is the sort of announcement made by the Tories yesterday about what's happening with the Irish border in the worst case scenario of a no-deal Brexit. And the other is briefly touching on the start of the SNP summer conference, which begins today. So first things first, let's look at what happened yesterday with regards to the British government's position on the Northern Irish border. By the 28th of this month, by the 28th of June, the British government has to have agreed what the position is about the Northern Irish border post-Brexit. It needs to have a plan in place which the European Union can accept, and it needs to have that by the end of this month in order for any kind of meaningful talks about a Brexit deal, in other words a trade deal. Before any of those things can happen, we must convince the Europeans that the problem of the Northern Irish border is sorted. Did they achieve that yesterday? Well, the answer to that has to be no, because all that has happened because of a rift in the Tory party between the Remainers and the Brexiteers is that they have created a fudge which was carefully worded but basically says that they will not be able to come up with a deal for the Northern Irish border for another 3 years at least. They want to extend it, kick it down the road another 3 years to 2021. In other words, they're saying if there's a hard Brexit, that Northern Ireland will stay in the customs union in parallel with the EU until 2021. Now think about that just for a moment. The consequences of that would be the rest of the UK Brexit's in a hard Brexit with no trade deal. Northern Ireland for 2 to 3 years would remain in the European Union. Now can you see that working? Because that's what they're saying is going to happen. If there is no other agreement on the Northern Irish border and there is no trade deal, the backstop, the final last resort would be Northern Ireland staying in a form of customs union with the European Union after 2021. It would stay in the European Union itself until 2021, whereas the rest of the country will have to suffer hard Brexit. I can't see that being a workable solution, and I don't believe that the Europeans will accept that either. So I think that the fudge, this constant internal, the internal struggle between the Brexiteers in the Tory party and the Remainers is not over. The Brexiteers haven't won, the Remainers haven't won. What's happened is they've just kicked the can down the road another 3 years from now. So 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and then they might make a decision about Northern Ireland. So basically they still don't know what to do about Northern Ireland, and the reason they don't know what to do is because there isn't an answer to it. It's as simple as that. It's a conundrum which you cannot solve. Either you have the Good Friday Agreement where North and South of Ireland have an open border, or you don't. So what I think could happen is, in the worst case scenario, is that there's a hard Brexit and the British government takes a decision to annul the Good Friday Agreement, basically to break the conditions of the agreement so that Northern Ireland and the South no longer have an agreement over their border and the border can be closed. I don't see any other way of them doing this. They have to put in a hard border eventually, whether it's in 2019 or 2021, there has to be a hard border because that is the frontier of the European Union to the outside world, in other words, to the rest of us. And if there's not a hard border there, they cannot control imports and exports, taxes and immigration. They just can't control it. There is no mechanism for doing that. It doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. So I think, again, the British government has failed again to come up with any solution to the problems of Northern Ireland. But this is of their own making. You know, if you take over somebody else's territory and stay there and outstay your welcome, and then you make some massive political leap like this, there are consequences, and one of the consequences is you either have a hard border across that country or you get out of that country and let it reunify. And perhaps the latter is the better thing for the British government to do, because it would mean that the British government didn't have to support Northern Ireland financially anymore, and that the North and South could recombine to form a new island, which would probably be stronger than the two original parts of it as separate entities would be. So there are benefits in Ireland to reunification. One of them would possibly be the introduction of a better health service for the whole of Ireland. There are upsides to this, but the point is the British government just will not face up to the fact that their Brexit is going to mean the end of the frictionless border in Ireland. It just cannot sustain it anymore. Brexit will kill it. There is no answer to it. Whether they kick it into the long grass for another 3 years or not, the European Union negotiators know fine well that the British can't fix this problem. And the cut-off time is the 28th now. So if they don't make it by the 28th with a solution that the Europeans can accept, the deal is off, and there will be no Brexit deal, because if they don't sort this problem of Northern Ireland, we're not going to be allowed to negotiate a trade deal, remember. And if we don't negotiate a trade deal by March 29th next year, we are out on our ear with no agreement. And perhaps that's what the Tories want. And then they'll just blame the Europeans for the hard Brexit. And all of the hardship that the rest of the UK will go through will not matter to the Tories, because they're all rolling in money. They're all connected everywhere with lots of money and banks and oil companies and so on. They've got fingers in every pie. The Tories won't be hurt by it, but the whole rest of the country will be. But do you think they'll care about you? I don't think they will. Anyway, moving on to the SNP conference, which opens today. I think I know for a fact that many people are travelling from all corners of the globe to get to the SNP conference, including from Europe, incidentally. And I know from speaking to contacts in Europe that political experts in Europe believe that the SNP must act this week, that they must grasp this nettle and say, we're going to go for a new independence vote on such and such a date. And the reason that they have to do it now is because there's not going to be any clarity on the deal that the Europeans and the British do, because the British aren't going to do a deal. They're not going to be allowed to do a deal because the Irish problem can't be solved. But what we do know, and we know this from companies in the UK, which are trade organisations like the Road Transport Association, are absolutely freaking out because thousands and thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands of truck journeys will just stop, because as soon as there's a hard Brexit, their trucks will not be going overseas. They won't be going into Europe. They won't be coming back from Europe. They will be trapped in various ports, unable to move. And the whole of the get it next day infrastructure that we rely on in the UK with our truck network will grind to a shuddering halt. And not only that, but things like food imports will stop virtually overnight, because the trucks will not be able to clear customs in time before the food they're carrying goes off, or before the meat they're carrying goes off, or the vegetables, whatever it is. So you see the problem. The Road Transport Association is not convinced. They have published several open letters to the government saying that they don't believe that Brexit can be done without catastrophically hurting the road transport's infrastructure of the United Kingdom. So now is definitely the best time, really, I believe, and a lot of political analysts in Europe believe it's the best time now for the SNP to say, now this is the time scale to independence. This is how the vote will go. This is when we're going to vote on it. We don't care whether we've got a Section 30 or not. We're holding a public vote. It will be done according to the rules with international observers as an advisory referendum in exactly the same way as the Brexit referendum was conducted as an advisory. And the fact that the Brexit vote is being treated as binding sets a precedent in Britain under its tradition of not writing a constitution but working on historic precedents. That means that the Scottish referendum, if it's a yes vote, will also have to be honoured in the same way as the European exit referendum was. So If it's good enough for Brexit, it's good enough for Scot exit. And I think the Tories know this. They are going to resist it. They're going to say, now is not the time. We're not going to grant you a Section 30 order. They're going to try and make us believe that we have to gain their permission before we vote. And we have to make sure that we counter that argument with everybody that we meet, that we don't require a Section 30 order to have an information referendum, one which advises government. Because that's what the Brexit vote was. It wasn't a binding referendum. And you can point them to the information that says that the Brexit vote was not a binding referendum. And if they think, well, if it's not a binding referendum, why are we Brexiting? Then they should really ask that question of the Tories. Because the Tories could have said it was only an advisory referendum, we're not going to honour it. But now they have burnt their bridges and they can't go back. So, sauce for the goose being sauce for the gander, now is probably as good a time as any for the SNP to name the day, and I really hope that they do that in the next couple of days. I think a lot of us are praying that we're going to get the starting gun fired. Everybody was wondering why the SNP was having its summer conference now and not later. There are a number of reasons for that, but this timing of the Scottish National Party's conference is important, and I think it was timed for this particular time for a reason, and that was to give them enough of a timescale to lead into the next referendum. Now I believe, I may be wrong here, but I believe we need to have about 16 weeks, legally speaking, as a minimum time frame leading into any referenda. Doesn't matter whether it's advisory or not. So 16 weeks from now, right, 4 months from now, we've got July, August, September, October. That would possibly mean a referendum in October, which is about the right timescale, because we'll also know by then whether we're getting a hard Brexit or no Brexit deal at all, or whatever is going to happen. It will be happening by around about October. By the 29th of March, it will be too late. If we wait too long to vote, then it's too close. And if it's too close, then the yes vote, if it comes after Brexit, will be too late, because Brexit will take precedence over it. It will have happened before we voted yes. Therefore, we will be out of the EU before we leave the UK, and that's not something that we want to have happen. I believe that Michel Barnier, when he was talking to Nicola Sturgeon 10 days ago, was probably just saying this to her: look, if you want to come out of the UK, you will need to do it before you Brexit, so that the European Union can offer you a suspended membership of the EU while your country is rebuilt, and then you're kept in a holding pattern, so you're at the front of the queue to rejoin. That's what I believe has happened with Barnier, and that's my own supposition, obviously. But Nicola Sturgeon must have been in Brussels for more than just the reason of saying we disagree with Brexit. Right? She was there for some other reason, and anybody with half a brain knows that she will have been asking Barnier, what is the criteria for Scotland remaining in Europe? What's the timescale needed for that? So everything is about timing at the moment. So let's see what happens with the SNP summer conference. I don't want to try and forecast what they'll do. They might not announce the referendum in this particular conference, but they might announce when they're going to announce it. This is the kind of thing that can be done in politics. You can actually trail an event, but not tell anybody what the actual timing of it will be. You can now say there is going to be a referendum before the 29th of March, but you don't have to tell the Tories exactly when. That's probably what will happen, I think. Anyway, I have to go and do some more work, and I will be watching keenly this today. If you're interested in what's happening at the SNP conference, then watch it on Independence Live. We're covering the whole event. Dr. Mark McNaught, who has come over to Scotland for this event from France, will be interviewing various key figures at the conference as well. And Independence Live will be covering the event as it unfolds. So get yourselves onto Independence Live today if you want to see what's going on. Don't trust the BBC to give you information, because you know what they're like. The mainstream media will just pick and choose what they want to show you. And if you really want to hear what's actually being said, and what real people and real politicians at that conference are saying, then tune in to Independence Live. I'll see you all later. Bye for now.